creation are generally Hindus and Muslims. So just because you accept a certain view of how the world works does not necessarily mean that you're going to go ahead and reject everything else that might imply. It doesn't mean that at all. So I think it's a very disingenuous argument. It's a very divisive argument. And you see a lot more in this country than you see in say Europe or other predominantly Christian countries, where there's this idea is thrown about quite frequently.
Do you count that as a failure of our educational system?
I think it's partly that, and also probably a failure of our political system, where it is okay to get votes as long as you're willing to pander to those who want to basically hold humanity back. We have, as a species, I think we have an enormous amount of potential to do good for each other, and for this planet, and for every species that we haven't killed off yet. So, but yeah, I think we have an enormous amount of potential, and those people that want to follow a very, very strict idea of what God is and what religion should be. I think it can be very destructive, and you see a lot of that in the world today. So,
have you looked at any of like the Hubble space?
Oh yeah,
telescopes. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you taken a very good look at the formations of animals, human faces?
Yeah.
The bodies that are obviously there.
It's actually there's a psychological phenomenon. It's called pareidolia. It is a hardwired into us, because people in order to survive when we were much different than we are now in the culture that we live in now. It was important for us to be able to recognize faces, recognize human forms. So there's this automatic need to see faces in things. I'm actually kind of looking around to see what I can see, but
there's one
right over here, right
on the top of the Coke machine.
Oh yeah. And also looking back here, you see the thermostat, and back over there too. There underneath it, there is an outlet, and automatically you can look at that and you see 2 eyes and a mouth. That's hardwired into us, and it's a way for us. It is a way for us to recognize faces instantly. This is also why. I'm sorry. Pareidolia.
Pareidolia.
Yeah. This is also why humans, I think, also are so attracted, as far as their interspecies relationships, why we're so attracted to dogs, cats. These are our closest companions generally. What do they also have? They have stereoscopic vision like people do, and they express emotions not unlike people do. So they have a lot of the same kind of psychological makeup, and I think that's why we identify with these animals so well, and why dogs identify with us. I mean, we can't survey a dog and have a razor paws and say, only this piece of face, razor my paw. But at the same time, it's obvious. I mean, we've had a partnership with these animals for going on 30,000 years, and I think that is probably very similar. They identify with us the same way that we identify with them because of these shared common characteristics. I was going to make one other point, and I got sidetracked.
Form is what you're saying?
I'm sorry?
We dislike abstracts. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and frequently that's what it is. It's like seeing in a sense like seeing drafts in clouds in the sky or something like that. It's just it's a way the brain tries to put things together that somehow make sense to us in the world we live in. This is probably where things like the canals Mars came from. Canals were never really there, but there's an automatic association to connect the dots, even though they're not there. Constellations in the sky. Constellations are just the arrangement of the stars in the sky from our viewpoint. We move to another part of the galaxy. All the stars can be in completely different places because space is three-dimensional. So yeah, I think it's just kind of an automatic response. I mean, this is where much of the many mythologies come from as well. It's just because you see this guy or lay back on a clear night and point things out and say, well, this right here, this is the story of the great hunter and the great bull, and whatever you put together. Or if you happen to be in Mesoamerica, ancient Mesoamerica, you're pointing out Orion as the great spider. It just depends on your viewpoint and your particular set of myths that you put together based on these pictures.
Have you taken the objective view as opposed to the subjective in the ways of looking through the eyes of the creator, as if maybe you were, and the constellations were set, as it says in the word, sight, sign, and direction.
Mm-hmm.
So these were things that were placed there specifically so they could be charted out, so that we would know the points from the sky to the earth.
Yeah.
As we know, there's a lot of buildings that have been set, and they're in arrangement. They're aligned.
Well, that's also it's an interesting point too, because for many ancient cultures, especially when agriculture was new, knowing the sky was a matter of life and death. If you used the sky as a calendar, you knew when to plant. And building devices like medicine wheels and Stonehenge and heck, even pyramids, much of that is actually built because so much importance was placed on the sky and how we viewed it and how we used it as in many of our ancient cultures. The other part of that, though, is that we know now that stars move, and over time they just move so slowly that it's really hard to perceive. I mean, some of the fastest moving stars that we see are ones that are very close to us, but are so dim or not visible to the naked eye because they're very, very tiny. Tiny, relatively speaking, much larger than, say, Jupiter or something like that. But still, they're small enough and dim enough that some of these closest stars cannot be seen with the naked eye. And we know these stars move, and we can actually not just measure these stars that are only visible through a telescope, but even the brighter stars. We can actually see them move as well over time based on the background stars. So we know they move. So obviously nothing is set. It's like taking shaking a bunch of pepper into a pie plate full of water and stir it around, and then you just see how those pepper flakes of pepper move around. That's the way our stars are moving around right now. So it is, but
does that
again,
give you access to a certain sense of spirit? How do you think of the spiritual in relation to your cosmology? Do you think of how do you conceive of what we think of in people as spirit, as a moment when you feel like an experience you have is spiritual? Do you have a way of defining those things, either in terms of your cosmology or your science or your original kind
I'm still kind of, part of me is still kind of working on that. I mean, I've gone through a great deal of change recently, and I'm rethinking a lot about the way I see the world and the way I see my life. But yeah.